everyone, welcome to Curtin Call. I'm Kevin Curtin. I'm here today in New Jersey with a very special guest. Now, this man sitting right next to me has sold over 100 million records. He's had 32 top Billboard charting hits and 2 #1s. And he's got a book out called Me, the Mob, and the Music, which is out. It's been out for a while, and it's actually in development to be made into a movie. So make sure you check the book out and check the movie out when it comes out. And he's also got a brand new album out called Alive, and you could also pick that up when you get a chance. It's a great album, and we'll talk about that soon. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to the legendary Tommy James.
Well, thank you so much.
Tommy James and the Shondells. Tommy,
how are you? Good
Tommy,
to see you.
Thank you for coming on the show, and you know, we'll get right into this. So, if you can, if you could just take me back to, you know, Niles, Michigan, and kind of the early days of, you know, kind of getting started, and maybe the first time you were, you know, sitting there and saying, you know, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Wow.
You know?
Well, yes, I'm from Niles, Michigan, a little town in southern Michigan. And I started my first band there, and we were called Tom and the Tornadoes. And we played VFW halls and American Legions and sock hops and things. And I got a little job at a record shop, mom and pop record shop, called the Spin It Record Shop. And I was allowed to promote my band out of there, and I was a clerk. And I dusted the windows, or I washed the windows and did the floor and everything. So I actually had 2 little label deals from the Spin It Record Shop from my years at the Spin It. One was with an outfit called Northway Sound in southern Michigan, and that was my first record when I was 14. And then when I was 16, I was asked by a local DJ who was starting a label called Snap Records if we would come and record for him. And I think I thought for a second, I went, hell yes! and so that's where Hanky Panky came from, my first record. We recorded 4 sides for him, and one of them was Hanky Panky. And I had heard another group play it and saw the reaction and couldn't wait to do it. So I remembered 6 words. My baby does the hanky panky, and we sang that 106 times, and we had a record. And so the record kind of came and went though, and you know, we did okay locally, but again, it wasn't a big deal. So I graduated from high school in '65, and I took my band on the road, and we were playing clubs in all throughout the Midwest, and I was playing in early '66 this dumpy little club in Janesville, Wisconsin, and right in the middle of my 2 weeks, the guy goes belly up. He gets shut down by the IRS for not paying his taxes. So we got sent home feeling like real dogs, real losers, but that's how the good Lord works, because as soon as I got home, I got a call that changed my life, that Hanky Panky, this record we had recorded 2 years earlier, was suddenly sitting at #1 in the city of Pittsburgh. Only in America, folks, you know. And what had happened is they had bootlegged the record and sold 80,000 of them in 10 days, and we had a #1 record in a major market, Pittsburgh. And so they tracked me down, because it said Niles, Michigan on the label, and asked me if I'd come to Pittsburgh. So I did. I went and did I couldn't put the original group back together. So I went to Pittsburgh and did TV and radio and the newspapers and everything. And while I was there, I had to get a band of Shondells together. By the way, we had changed our name to the Shondells. And so I had to get a group together. Excuse me. I walked into a club one night, and there's this group called the Raconteurs that were really great, and sang like birds and played great. So I said, "You want to be the Shondells?" They said, "Hell yes!" and a week later, we're in New York selling the master. And we got a yes from everybody. I mean, literally a thumbs up from Columbia, RCA, Epic, Lori Records, remember the Lori, Kama Sutra Records, Atlantic. And so I went to bed that night feeling great that we were probably going to be on one of the big corporate labels and everything. Life was good. So the next morning, about 9 o'clock, I started getting calls from all these companies that had said yes the night before, and or the day before, and I saying, "Listen, Tom, we got to pass." I said, "What do you mean you got to pass? I thought we had a deal." And Jerry Wexler at Atlantic Records told me the truth, that the head of Roulette Records, where we took the record last, Morris Levy had called up all the other companies and scared them to death and said, "This is my record." So it was the first offer I couldn't refuse. So we were apparently going to be on Roulette Records. And sure enough, we were. I went up the next day. But that's how it all started for me. I hate to get so long-winded, but
no. I mean, you already answered a couple of my questions, but I wanted to know, what do you remember about that first interaction between you and Morris?
Right.
The first interaction, you shake his hand. What was that whole meeting like?
Well, first of all, he was right out of the movies. Morris Levy, I'm talking about. He was about 6'3". I guess he must have weighed about 240, 250. A big guy. And he talked like this. And right out of Central Casting. And I shook his hand. It was like grabbing a catcher's mitt. That's how big his hands were. And so, I had heard a lot about roulette being mobbed up and everything, but I didn't really know, and I didn't really care. I just wanted to hit record. So, but he was fascinating. You couldn't take your eyes off of him. He was like watching a great actor. He was just interesting, the way he talked, the way he moved, the way he got it around.
He was
the
a
office.
character. He was a real character.
He really was.
Yeah.
And so that was all my first impressions turned out to be true.
So what was the what did he lay out to you at that point? Hey, we're going to do this. What was the grand plan the first time you kind of?
Well, he had one actually.
Yeah.
And first of all, it was to meet everybody. Murray the K was sitting in the office. George Goldner was sitting in the office. Howard Fisher, Red Schwartz, who worked up at the label, and I thought it was the neatest place I'd ever been to. Anyway, he told me about the scheme, what we're going to do. We're going to do a little of this and a little of that. You're going to be in the studio. We're going to make an album. He says, Hanky Panky's going to be a smash. He said, I thought maybe you could use a little spending money. And so, that was that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
He said, we're going to do an album. And I said, really? Because I didn't have any song. He said, you got other stuff, right? Oh, sure. I had nothing. So at any rate, suddenly right in the middle of this meeting, two guys come up to the door and knock on the door. Moish, can we see you? And these are big guys.
Yeah.
Goombas, I believe they call them. And he goes, I said, excuse me. They all talk that way too, It's like
they all have the deep voices.
They go to school and learn that. And so he goes over and I can hear what they're saying. That they had to beat some guy up in Jersey for bootlegging their record, one of their records. And it's, well, you got to do what you got to do, And so Red Schwartz is saying to me, so, Tom, this is your first trip to New York, huh? And I go, yeah. And you could overhear Morris talking. Anyway, so it didn't make me feel any better, any more confident. Let's put it that way. So he comes back and he sits down. And basically that was the end of our meeting. And so we were scheduled to go in the studio and all that stuff. So... that was my first meeting of Morris Levy, and it was pretty interesting.
So what do you remember about that first record, working with the band, being in the studio, being on the label? What are your I guess, fondest memories maybe of, those times?
Sure. Well, the very beginning of my career in the record business was amazing. It was like being in the eye of a storm. I was a spectator for about 6 months, truly. I remember going in the studio over at Bell Sound in New York and putting the Hanky Panky album together in 2 weeks.
Wow.
I mean, we literally just anything I knew and anything they knew, and we'd get together on. And we did a lot of covers. Our second record, Say I Am, was brought to me. It came out of the same record bin that Hanky Panky came out of back in Pittsburgh. And my new manager, Bob Mack, from Pittsburgh, brought this record by the Fireballs called Say I Am. And we learned it note for note in the studio. And it became our second record and went gold in a matter of about 3 weeks. So honestly, it was a magic time because good Lord was just looking out for me. That's all I can say, because I knew nothing. Suddenly I'm living in New York, and I'm making records, and every record was a hit for us. So, it was really an amazing time. In about 3 records, we had Hanky Panky, Say I Am, and It's Only Love. And then Richie Cordell and Bo Gentry brought me I Think We're Alone Now.
So yeah, maybe can we transition into how did you originally meet them? How did they get brought into the picture?
Sure.
And what that relationship was like?
Well, basically, a girl that I was seeing in New York at that moment, who was Red Schwartz's secretary. Red Schwartz was the
reading that in
head
the book,
of A&R, or excuse me, head of promotion. And her name was Ronnie, and she took me around New York and introduced me to everybody in the clubs. And anyway, bottom line was her roommate, her girlfriend and roommate was going with Richie Cordell. And she said, and I go over to pick her up one night, and I play this acetate of a song that, on the record player. And, the turntable had a nickel and a quarter on the top. That's how bad it was. And I'm playing this dub, and it's a song called Hold On to Him. And I said, that's a great song. Because I had nothing. And we had to do the album and next singles, and I had to keep going, and I had nothing. And so I desperately needed some producers and writers. So she says, oh, that's my roommate's boyfriend. You want to meet him? Yeah. So he comes over the next night. It's Richie Cordell. And he has a whole writing team of friends over at Kama Sutra. Kama Sutra at that time was where the Love and Spoonful recorded, and they had just a slew of great writers. And, they were making very progressive stuff. And so I met Richie the next night, and he introduced me to Bo and to Sal, the people he was writing with. And within a day, they brought me I Think We're Alone Now.
Jeez.
And I Think We're Alone Now, when they presented it to me, it was a ballad.
Really?
Yeah, it was not quite a slow ballad, but mid-tempo to slow. But you heard the hook, and you just knew immediately that was a smash.
Yeah.
And so we went in the studio and did a demo of it. Bo sang lead, and I came up with the doom 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 doom. We sped up the record.
Yeah.
And Morris loved it, and we recorded it. I did the vocal Christmas Eve, 1966. Yeah.
Wow.
At Allegro Sound. So with Bo and Richie, I suddenly changed studios. I brought in Jimmy Wisner, who was our arranger, and we just had a whole new production team almost overnight. And we kept that production team together for about the next 7 or 8 records before I started producing the group.
What was the dynamic like between all you guys, and what
It was
were
great.
those?
I must say it was wonderful. We had, you never know who was going to come in the studio. We were recording at 1650 Broadway downstairs. It started out as Kama Sutra's demo studio, and we turned it into a master studio. And loved, and my engineer, Bruce Staple, down there was a genius. And it was just wonderful making records together. And we had people coming in off the streets that were other musicians, great camaraderie, and just made a slew of great records. And I loved making records with these guys.
I was going to ask, too, who were some of the groups that were inspiring you around that time that maybe, you know, inspired some of your musical choices?
Well, back then, everybody was stealing from everybody.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's all derivative anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah.
I mean, there were so many great acts. Of course, everybody was following the Beatles, big time.
Yep.
They led the way for a lot of stuff. They really did.
Beach Boys.
Beach
Probably,
Boys,
yeah.
too. But mainly, there's so many acts. Top 40 at that moment, and I'm talking about 1966 to 1967, was spectacular.
Yes.
First of all, AM Top 40, everybody was listening to the same 40 records. You could cover the whole country with 12 stations. That's how big these big 50,000 watt stations were across the country. Every town had every major city had a 50,000 and a 5,000 watt station. The 5,000 watt was sort of the farm team, and the 50,000 watt station was, you know, the big chart active station. And radio was tremendous back then. Everybody was on the same page, and everybody was looking for the next hit. So, you know, we were putting out 5 singles a year and 2 albums a year for several years there, and we could have done more. You know, it's just so they'd eat them up as fast as we could make them. And so when things changed to FM radio, really in '68, FM started playing rock and roll. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
Because it was in stereo, it sounded so much better. But I still loved those mono singles to this day, because you know, everything is coming at you. It's just, you know, in your face, and so I have great respect for AM Top 40 radio from back then. It's too bad it all changed.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with mono having that very you know, unique sound, and like you said, I mean, those records you can't replace them. They're some of the best of all time. I want to talk about or have you talk about Mirage, and also one of my favorites is Baby Baby I Can't Take It No More. What are your, you know, memories of those songs, and maybe some other behind the scenes stories?
Well, Mirage, believe it or not, was I Think We're Alone Now backwards.
Right.
I know that sounds like a 60s PR story, but it's the truth. We were listening to the final mix of I Think We're Alone Now up at Beau's apartment. And, you know, back then, if you got the tape on upside down, it played backwards. And so whatever we were smoking, I don't know. We got the tape on upside down, and we started listening to it, and said, you know, that's a hell of a chord progression. That's not bad backwards. It's really not. So Beau and Richie go off and write it, and it became Mirage. Yeah. And we started the record off with cellos instead of guitars. Jimmy Wisner was so great.
Incredible arrangement.
He really was spectacular. He would take these almost nursery rhyme ditties that Beau would write and turn them and orchestrate them. And we'd go from cellos to an andiolene to a piccolo, you know. It just and he would have all of these incredible instruments. We started working with. He was our George Martin. He really was, and he was brilliant. So he took Mirage, and because it sounded like backwards guitars sounded like cellos.
Sure.
So he actually took cellos, and we started the record off with cellos. And of course, it became another gold record for us. And the flip side, which was from the I Think We're Alone Now album, we did the whole album over at Allegro. Baby, Baby, I Can't Take It No More was my first cover record by another artist. It was the first record that I wrote with Richie, and immediately got covered by Verdell Smith on Capitol Records, a great R&B
great song,
artist.
Great song,
and she did a great job. It was produced by Kenny Vance in New York, and so I was so proud. It's so interesting to hear somebody else do one of your songs.
I was going to ask, were you channeling anyone in particular when you were doing your version? Was there anyone in mind? Or?
Of Mirage?
No, for Baby, Baby, I Can't Take It No More.
No, it was just... well, Richie had a tendency to write the big major sevenths. I usually wrote with major chords and real simple stuff. He would do the major sevenths and little jazzier chords, and I loved that. And so we wrote Baby, Baby, I Can't Take It No More with him playing piano. And it was,
because it's really soulful. It's a nice...
thank you.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. So bring me up to 1968, Mony Mony. I think you've probably told this story, many times, but...
Well, then I won't bother you with it. I won't burden you with...
But for our audience and for maybe some folks that haven't heard the story, what can you kind of take me back to?
Sure. Well, after Mirage, we had several more records, and then I started getting a little restless, and I'd like to participate in the production. I really was learning a lot. I called Bo and Richie the kings of 4-track because they were great with 4-track. And the thing with 4-track that was so frustrating is you couldn't do very much. You needed a slide rule and a protractor to figure out how you're going to finish the damn record. You're going, all right, well, we'll fill up track 1 and 3. And it was particularly frustrating because you couldn't bounce to an adjacent track. So, we'd have to go track 1 to 3, track 2 to 4. And so you had to figure all this stuff out before you made the record, before you started putting stuff on the record. Suddenly, 8-track loosened things up a little bit. And the first 8-track record we did was Mony Mony. And I started recording the track itself with Brooks Arthur down at Century Sound. And we just wanted, my whole idea was just to make a sort of a throwback record, the old Gary U.S. Bonds records, Mitch Ryder records, where it was just sort of slap happy rock and roll with
something people could sing along to.
And sort of live sounding and trash rock is what garbage is what I'm trying to say. So we accomplished that. So as the thing came together, we had no title, and but it just kept coming together and coming together. Finally, we took it back to Allegro. Allegro was up for repairs or something. They were installing the 8-track machines. And we went back to Allegro and finished the record. And it was the night before I was supposed to do the lead vocal. And Richie and I are up at my apartment in New York trying to come up with a title. We had no working title. We called it Glorm or something, some silly word. And so we had to come up with something. And we knew we needed a 2-syllable girl's name. And we're looking Sloopy, Boney Maroney, some crazy name like that. And so Richie and I throw our guitars down. We go out in the terrace, and we light up a cigarette, and we look up in the night sky, and the first thing our eyes fall on is the Mutual of New York Insurance Company sign. M-O-N.
I just love stories like this,
with the dollar sign and
like it was made for you.
Well, it was like God saying, "Here's the title." So we both see it at the same time. We just start laughing. It's perfect.
Perfect. Can't make it up.
If I'd have been looking in the other direction, I was so desperate, we might have called it Hotel Taft. I don't know, anything. Equitable.
Yeah, right.
but that was it, and that was just the perfect title, and so that was it, Moni, Moni, Moni,
Right.
and did the lead vocal and the next night in the studio. We were bringing in people off the street to do the hand claps, and we really did. We were paying people to come in. We probably wouldn't do that today, but yeah, so it was our friends, and it was really a party that got captured on tape.
And, for the people that don't know, or maybe some do, some don't, but can you talk a little bit about how in the 80s when Billy Idol did Moni Moni, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Tiffany did, I think We're Alone Now, she did a cover of that, and Billy Idol obviously did Moni Moni. They were competing for the #1 spot at the same time, right?
Yeah, that had never happened before.
Yeah, that had never happened before.
I was flying out to California, and my wife
Unbelievable.
happened to say to me, this is early on, she said,
Yeah.
do you know that I Think We're Alone Now and Moni Moni are both being released as singles? And Tiffany and Billy Idol, and I didn't know a thing about it, and they went up the charts like they were holding hands. I mean, they tracked with each other, and by God, I can't remember which one went first. I think Moni went #1 first,
right?
And Tiffany was #2, and then the next week they reversed.
Wow!
And that had never happened before, where covers
and probably hasn't happened since.
I can't think of any time that's happened.
Pretty cool. Yeah.
That was I was very, very honored by that.
Yeah, very, very cool. So can you take us up to Crimson and Clover? Obviously, I think the people at home watching would probably want to know the story behind this song a little bit more, but also, do you remember writing it? Do you remember being, can you kind of take me through that?
Well, strategically, Crimson and Clover was... next to Hanky Panky, our most important record because of what was going on around us at the time. First of all, we had changed complexions so many times and changed styles. We'd gone into the party rock thing with Moni and Do Something to Me, and in the summer of '68. We got a call. This is all connected. We got a call from Hubert Humphrey's office, the vice president, that he was going to be nominated. Would we join him on the road? And, this is the first time ever that a politician and a rock group ever teamed up to do something like that. And it was just so out. I said, yes, okay, no problem. So we were supposed to meet him the following week after the convention in Wheeling, West Virginia. And so we're watching the convention where all the kids got beat up and all the radicals were getting beat up by the Chicago police, and they went into the convention. Oh my God, what the hell have we got ourselves into? Because we're supposed to meet him this next week. Is every rally going to be like that? And so we were very leery of all this. So anyway, we meet him, and he's wonderful to us, and puts me right up on the DS next to his wife Muriel. But he sort of showed us off, and so we're very honored by that. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because while we were out on the tour, we were writing this little song called Crimson and Clover, and we actually had 3 different versions of it, and the one that I wrote with my drummer Pete Lucia is the one we settled on. And but what happened during this campaign was nuts. I was asked to be president's advisor on youth affairs. I'm 21 years old.
Wow.
And I said something smart aleck back to him, like, believe me, the youth are having affairs and I'm just the boy to look into it. Something like that, So you know, we became friends, as close as you can be, a 21-year-old to a guy running for president.
Right.
So, at any rate, you know, the whole thing, we ended up doing the whole campaign with him. Well, of course, he ended up losing, and as I said, we had written Crimson and Clover on that campaign. He ended up doing the liner notes to the Crimson and Clover album. But that's another story.
Sure.
But anyway, while we're out on the campaign, now we left in August and came back in November. While we're out on the campaign, the record business turns upside down. Albums took over.
Right.
Starting with the Sgt. Pepper album in late '67, all the record companies saw how much money they could make making albums instead of singles. Plus, FM radio comes in. All the technology from the space program is coming down into the studios. We went from 4-track to 24 tracks in about 6 months. All the technology is changing. When we left, the big acts were the Rascals, the Association, Mitch Ryder, the Buckinghams, us, you know, all singles acts.
Yeah.
When we get back, 90 days later, it's Joe Cocker, Crosby, Stills and Nash,
all albums,
Blood, Sweat and Tears, Led Zeppelin, all album acts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what the hell? There was this mass extinction of singles acts.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Right at that moment. And we knew that if we didn't start selling albums,
You'd be gone.
We'd be gone. And thank God we were working on Crimson and Clover at that moment. Because Crimson and Clover allowed us to make that jump from singles AM top 40 radio to progressive album rock. No other record, I don't think that we ever did, would have done that. And all of a sudden we're selling albums. Roulette had never sold albums before, not like that.
Right.
And so we're selling albums and singles. And so that just made all the difference in the world. And Crimson and Clover gave us the rest of our career.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say that was strategically, next to Hanky Panky, the most important record I ever made. And I also started producing the group at that moment.
Right.
And so we started writing our own stuff, producing our own stuff, so the world turned upside down for us, starting with that record.
What do you remember about writing that song, conceiving it, working with the group?
Well, the title I came up with early in the morning, like I had almost dreamed the title.
Really?
Yeah, right when I was getting out of bed, and because you're always on the make for, when you're a songwriter, for interesting word combinations and stuff. And Crimson and Clover just sounded so majestic, and I had no idea what it meant. We had to make it mean something, but it sounded so poetic and just full of profundity. So we had to make it mean something, and so it was really just a little 3-chord record. And the tremolo effect, by the way, was almost by accident. I played it on the guitar, but we just, one of those things at the end, we say, well, let's see what it sounds like with the voice. Yeah. So we ran the voice through an Ampeg, to a Gemini 2 amp, and turned on the tremolo and mic'd it. And that became the end of Crimson and Clover. It's just really...
Very innovative for the time.
Well, thank you. But it was honestly very simplistic when you really analyze it. And then we blew it. So Morris wanted to have this big introduction of this big style change for us. And I take the record, a 7.5 rough mix, to Chicago the next day after we make the record. It's a work tape. It's just I mixed it with my elbows. It was just a work tape.
Yeah, it wasn't the.
And so I take it up to John Rook, who's program director at WLS in Chicago, the biggest station in the country, and I play it for him. He says, "Yeah, play that again, would you?" And they tape it.
Record.
They tape my tape, and I'm getting back into the car downstairs, and I hear, "World exclusive on WLS Chicago." Oh, and I go, "Oh my God, what have I done?"
Yeah.
And they're playing this work tape. It's not even the finished record.
Yeah.
So, and then we get static from the other station, CFL in Chicago, who was really upset that I gave it an exclusive to LS, and so they weren't going to play any more of my records. And I get back to New York, and he said, "What the hell did you do?" And so Red Schwartz calls up John Rook and says, "Tommy, you weren't supposed to play that." And so, "That's all right. We're going to play it every 20 minutes. And they made it a smash.
Yeah.
They broke the record out of Chicago. But I couldn't mix the record. I had to release this work tape. And so Crimson and Clover, the record we all know, was a 7.5 rough mix. I never got a chance to finish the record.
Yeah.
So that, again, was God winking at me saying, "You have finished the record." So,
And then years later, Prince covered it, right?
Prince did a beautiful job.
So how did that all come about? Did you get contacted for that? Did you have any interaction with Prince, or was
I never know till the record comes out,
Yeah.
He did the most amazing futuristic
He did.
version. Went #1 with it on the Lotus.
Yeah.
What was the name?
I think it was Lotus Flower. It was
Lotus
called.
Flower
Yeah.
album.
Yeah.
And first digital album, by the way. It was
Yeah.
all digital. And not too long before he died. And I was just so proud of that.
Yeah.
The only time
Because he didn't cover a lot of stuff, and
No.
the stuff that he did cover, he loved. So
yeah. So he kind of put that and Wild Thing together.
Yeah.
Crimson Clover and
Yeah.
Wild Thing. I was very honored by that.
Yeah, that was a great moment. Yeah. So, the other thing that I think was around this time, can you tell our audience when you got the call about Woodstock? I think that's a really funny story. I was reading about that in the book.
Wasn't funny at the time.
No, but this is a good one.
Well, we're in Hawaii,
Yeah.
at the foot of Diamond Head, where we have this gorgeous Spanish villa mansion, 21-room mansion, half indoor, half outdoor.
Unbelievable.
And we're in the midst of a 2-week period where we played in Hilo the first night, and we're playing in Honolulu 2 weeks later. And the promoter, Tom Moffat, out there, put us up in this gorgeous palace. And so, the biggest decision of the day was, do you go swimming in the pool or in the ocean? So all of a sudden, we get this call from my secretary, Joanne, at Roulette. And she says, "Well, Artie Kornfeld was up, and they'd ask if you'd come and play this gig in upstate New York. It's at a pig farm." And I said, "What? What?" True story. That's how it was put to me.
Unbelievable.
And I said, "A pig farm? Oh yeah, I'm going to leave paradise, fly 6,000 miles, and play a pig. I tell you, if I'm not there, start without us, okay?"
Yeah.
And they did, and it was called Woodstock. and by Friday, we knew we screwed up really bad.
Unbelievable. Was there anything after that with Morris? Any funny interactions with him saying, "Yeah, you should have done it. You're crazy,"
Well, there was lots of interactions with Morris Levy all during this period of time. Some of them were pretty scary, actually.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What was maybe one of the scariest ones that you remember?
Go right for the dirt, right?
Might as well. Might as well,
Well, basically, getting paid from Roulette, you might as well take a bone from a Doberman. I mean, it's just not going to happen. Crime doesn't pay,
Yeah.
So, at any rate, we were constantly being told that we were spending more money in the studio than we were making. That was the whole idea.
Right.
And of course, that's ridiculous. How do you do 100 million records,
Exactly.
but you still owe us money? And then my lawyer would keep telling me, "Tom, you're cross-collateralized." "Oh, I am?" "Shot of penicillin will clear that up."
Yeah.
Well, I just, it was always really rough. But we had to decide, because these were scary people. And I was meeting people in Morris's office that I had only seen on TV.
Yeah.
We'd meet a guy in Morris's office, and a week later we'd see him in handcuffs doing a perp walk coming out of a warehouse in Jersey, you know.
Yeah.
And say, isn't that the guy we just met in Morris's office? And
Yeah.
this would keep happening and keep happening. We realized who we were rubbing shoulders with.
And he'd keep baseball bats in the office, right?
Well, Roulette was a front for the Genovese
Right, that's right.
family in New York.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, Morris
I remember
was,
reading about that in the book, yeah.
They would, he'd just say, Karen, call my lawyer, as he's leaving with a baseball bat on, you know. And they would go get people bootlegging their records. They were scary people. So at any rate, we made up our mind that we were having such success at Roulette with the records that it was, why would we want to bother that? Plus, we wanted to live.
Right. Right.
You know, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but I mean, the point is that, well, you know what happened to Jimmy Rogers. You read that story.
Yeah.
So the bottom line was that we just kind of made up our mind, because we were making money from other things, the road, BMI, you know, we were commercials. We were doing a lot of stuff, touring, and so honestly, and we were having one gold record after another. It just didn't make any sense to break all that up. We ended up with 23 gold records at Roulette, gold singles, and 9 gold and platinum albums. And did about 110 million records all told. So I'd have been a fool to break that up.
Moving right along, you know, if we can, to jump into Sweet Cherry Wine and also Crystal Blue Persuasion. Obviously, again, you've probably told these stories many times, but if you can, take me back to those two, you know, if you can.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I was becoming a Christian during this period of time, and back then nothing was politically incorrect. You could say anything you want. You probably wouldn't get away with it today. They'd probably, somebody would have something to say about it. But Sweet Cherry Wine was a song that I wrote. It was as close to a religious theme as I'd ever had.
Sure.
And it was 3/4 time, so it was a very different kind of a record. And we followed up Crimson and Clover with Sweet Cherry Wine. And of course, during this period of time, we had finished the Crimson and Clover album. It had come out and it went gold immediately and then platinum. And I was starting another album called Cellophane Symphony, and Sweet Cherry Wine was from Cellophane Symphony. I'll tell you more about that in a minute.
Sure.
But and then Crystal Blue Persuasion was on the Crimson and Clover album, and then we followed up. Actually, we had recorded Crystal Blue before we did Sweet Cherry Wine, but we reversed them as singles.
Yeah.
And then Crystal Blue Persuasion, which was Morris's favorite song.
Is that right?
Yeah. With the Latin kind of feel. Crystal Blue was also about becoming a Christian, and even though a lot of people thought it was about drugs, and honestly, it was one of the toughest records we ever made.
Because you did a lot of versions of it, right, in the studio?
We did. Well, we just overproduced it.
Overproduced it.
We had a full set of drums, we had guitars, we had everything I could think of crammed on the record. And we listened to it again. It's not Crystal Blue anymore. So we unproduced it for the next month or so and tried this and that until finally we just pulled everything out. Pulled out the drums, pulled out the other electric guitars, the other keyboards, and it was left with just one electric guitar with a little tremolo on it, a conga drum, a bongo, a flamenco guitar, and a little organ. And we had to let it breathe.
Yeah.
You know,
and I'm glad you did, because it's one of the best.
Thank you.
Of all time.
Thank you.
And with Sweet Cherry Wine, I just want to go back to that really quick, because that's one of my favorite intros to a song. I love how it, you know, kind of builds up and then finally, you know. But you're known for having a lot of great intros. You know, your songs, some of the best intros ever.
You know what? Honestly, during the making of I Think We're Alone Now, we learned a lot about making records for the radio. And I don't mean to be so calculating, but the truth is that we learned so much on that record because disc jockeys love to talk across your intro.
Yeah.
And when you do an intro that's about 10 seconds long, sometimes 12, they like you a lot better than just starting out with the vocal. If you start with the vocal, they'll put you at the top of the hour after the news.
Right.
But if you put the nice long intro in, they can talk of, hey, I think we're alone now, blah,
yeah.
And they like to talk. So that was Sweet Cherry Wine. You know, so what can I say?
And one of the other great intros for you, I would say, is Dragging the Line.
Thank you.
And if you
same kind of thing.
Same kind of thing, yeah. But I love the way it starts and it just kind of it builds and builds, you know, and just all the instrumentation.
Bob King, my writing partner at that time, played bass. He came up with that line.
Is that right?
Yeah, and we constructed that record very much like we constructed Mony Mony.
Yeah.
In other words, we start out with we wrote the track.
Yeah.
We did the track before we did the words.
Oh, interesting.
Did the lyrics, and we put tape delay on the bass, so it kind of throbbed, and the same with the guitar.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And even the drum pattern is a little unique.
We had tape delay on everything.
Yeah.
We had it in sync with the record. It was a shuffle. But every so often, the tape would go out of sync.
Yeah.
So we had to make loops of Dragging the Line. We'd have to make like 8 bars at a time and just keep making loops of it to so it would work for the whole record. And wrote that song up at my farm in upstate New York. Probably couldn't have written it in the 60s. And had a lot of covers on that.
What inspired that one?
I can't really say, except it was the track just really moved me. The shuffle, the laid back shuffle with the throbbing, with the you know, that really rhythmically is what it. So we wrote a lyric that worked with that. You know?
And for everyone watching, obviously, you know, Morris Levy eventually passed away. And you eventually, Rhino bought out Roulette, right?
We've talked so much about what happened after that. I left Roulette, but one other incident happened that I probably should tell you about. We were playing in 1972. We were doing the Paramount Theater, and in 1969. Vito Genovese died on Valentine's Day in prison in Atlanta. And so the family changed hands, the Genovese family, and they did a lot of it up at Roulette. They would use Roulette as sort of a social club.
Right.
And so these guys were up there meeting, and the new head of the family was Tommy Ebele. Tommy Ryan was his alias. And I don't know if I should be saying all this, but the bottom line is that Tommy Ebele became the head of the family. And in 1972, we were playing the Paramount Theater in Brooklyn. And about 6 blocks from where we were performing, Tommy Ebele gets assassinated. And this is in July, I believe, of 72. And so I went back to Roulette on Monday, and the place is just... I went out because this is just too much. There was this tremendous gang war in 71 where a lot of people were killed. Yeah. I had to leave New York. I did the album in Nashville because I was told that it wouldn't be smart to stay in New York because if they can't get Morris, who left for Spain, they'd probably come after whatever was making Morris money, and that's you. So I left town in 1971 till the thing was over, and did the album down there. And so I had been I didn't want any more of this crap,
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't take any more. And so after we thought the whole thing was over, and then in '72 when Tommy Eberle was killed, I just exploded with Morris. I went up there and I just got good and loaded before I went up there, and I just had a blowout with Morris.
Yeah.
I said, I'm fucking leaving. I'm out of here. I don't give a shit what you say. Shoot me, because I'm leaving. He says, you ain't going anywhere. And so I couldn't get out of my contract, and I stayed there for another 2 years, but I didn't do any more records after '72. He kept releasing songs that I had already recorded, and kept having hits with him right up until '74. And then he let me leave. But my publishing had to stay there until '79.
Right.
So I signed with Fantasy Records out on the coast.
Yep.
I had 2 albums with Fantasy. I then came back and signed with Millennium, where we had 3 Times in Love, and You Got Me. We had 3 more chart records. One of them went #1, AC. And then gradually I started my own label, Aura Records. And in 1986, I happened to go up to Roulette with a few songs. I don't know what possessed me to do it.
Yeah.
Morris had changed offices. I go up and here's Morris sitting in this shady office with no action. The phones aren't ringing. And I play him a couple of songs. I play him a song called Distant Thunder, which is off the album.
Sure. Yep.
And it's going to be in the movie.
Oh, gotcha.
And by the way, we didn't say that it's, Me, the Mob, and the Music, our book is going to be a movie here soon.
Yes. Yes.
So anyway, Distant Thunder's in the movie, and I played it for him. This actually happened. He says, that's a fucking hit. He says, what kind of a deal are you looking for? I said, well, actually, I'm not looking for a label deal. I really want a label.
Yeah.
And so what it boiled down to is he wouldn't let me collect my own money, so I'd be in the same position I was before, and so I was really upset. Well, he gets arrested, and all of a sudden, so it's a good thing I didn't do the deal, and as we found out, he had a sign behind him, it was needlepoint, that said, "Oh Lord, give me a bastard with talent," and in the "Oh of Lord," the feds had put a camera and a microphone, and so it would have been a worthless a deal if I had made it, because he got arrested right then, and before he could spend a day in jail, he died of cancer in 1990, and he asked for me, and I was going to go up and see him the next day, and he died that quick, and I had such mixed feelings about the whole thing.
Yeah, I remember reading that in the book, that you still,
Because if it wasn't for Morris Levy, there wouldn't have been a Tommy James. But with all the shenanigans, I still had, and I still do have mixed feelings about him, because he was fun. He was more interesting, more fascinating, and more fun than any 10 people I can think of.
Is that right?
Yeah. And but he always chose the dark side. I mean, he really did. He'd rather steal $5 grand from you. Yeah. He got joy out of stealing from you, than make 10,000 illegally.
And eventually, Rhino bought Roulette. And
you started Roulette
getting royalties.
When he unloaded the company before he was going to jail. He unloaded the publishing. And he unloaded the masters to Warner's and Rhino. Yeah. The publishing has ended up at Sony. It first went through Fuji, a Japanese company, a film company.
Yeah, sure.
Had Windswept Pacific, and that is where the publishing went. Then, including all my songs from Roulette. And then it went to EMI, sold to EMI, and then EMI was sold to Sony. And so Sony now I have a wonderful relationship with.
Great.
And Rhino as well. And of course, I made back a good chunk of the money we lost.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know, I mean, I think everyone watching here knows your music has been utilized in films and TV so many times.
We have
you know,
63 movies.
63
Sony brought
movies,
me 13 movies this year.
Really?
Unbelievable. Movies and television features. So
yeah,
they're doing a fantastic job. They represent us in movies and television.
Awesome, awesome. And you know, before we wrap up here, when did you start writing Me, the Mob, and the Music? When did
Yeah, that was back in like '05.
'05.
We started writing it.
Yeah.
I was very nervous. We were going to call it Crimson and Clover.
Yeah.
And I was very nervous about finishing because some of these guys were still walking around.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
So finally, the last of the Roulette regulars passed away in '06.
The Roulette regulars.
It was, the guys that represented them. It was Vincent the Chin, Vinny the Chin Gigante.
Yeah, right.
Remember the guy who used to walk around in the bathrobe in Greenwich
yes,
Village?
I do. Yep.
And he passed away in '06 in prison. And we felt that we could finish the book.
Tell the stories. Yeah.
And I tried to be fair.
Yeah.
And you know, we as soon as we got finished with the book, we got calls for the movie rights and the Broadway rights. Going to be a musical after the movie. So.
Great. Almost like a little Frankie Valley
yes,
type of thing.
If we do 1/10 of the business,
that would be great. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. And when did this album Alive get brought into the?
That just came out recently, and in the last couple of months, and it was a 2-year labor of love.
2-year labor of love. Gotcha. And you know, and
of course I'm on Sirius. I have my own show on Sirius.
That's right.
XM.
Make sure you check Tommy out. I think it's every Sunday, right?
Every Sunday from 5 to 8 Eastern time.
Right.
It's called Getting Together, and it's so good. We've been doing it for almost 2 years now.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful. It's I love being a disc jockey. You know, whoever thought, and they let me play my own record. Whoever heard of an artist playing his own records on his own show?
And I just want to talk quickly, if we can, about a couple of the songs on here, but also you had Stephen Van Zandt on this record. So how did that come about?
Gene Cornish from the Rascals was on.
So I mean, how did those guys get brought into the
Tone
picture?
Z.
And Tone Z, right?
Tone Z, the rapper who did it.
That's right. Yeah. How did that all come together?
Well, it'd been 10 years since my last album, and here we are in the studio that we recorded it in. And
lovely studio, by the way.
Thank you.
If you can.
And
you can't see all of it, but it is beautiful. Yeah.
You can see a knob or two.
Yeah. Right.
But I was, you know, just I have to write. I have to write, and I got to make records because that's what I do. I don't know. I don't know how to do anything else. It's not like I have brain surgery to fall back on or anything.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple new songs in here, but there's also a couple different versions.
We did it,
Dragging the Line, and I Think We're Alone Now.
Right.
Both of those are very nice, you know, new versions or new editions of.
Thank you.
Yeah. So. Also, as Tommy mentioned before, we want to make sure that everyone knows that this book is available and it is being made into a movie, and it looks like it's going to be a Broadway ordeal as well, or endeavor. So we'll definitely want to make sure everyone checks that out when it does come out. Do we have any idea what year that's going to be coming out? I mean, movies
2047.
obviously. I mean, development for movies obviously
honestly,
takes a while.
It's been we were in development hell for about 8 years, as they call it.
Yeah.
And now things have sped up. Kathleen Marshall is our director.
Yeah.
Barbara DeFina is producing the movie.
Yeah.
You know, what an all-star cast.
Absolutely.
And of course, my manager Carol Ross is going to be an associate producer.
Yes.
I'm going to be a
executive producer. Yeah.
And but the whole production team is female, and they're all munchkins. They're all this tall. I don't know what this means. I don't know if that's good for me or bad for me, but they're going to. You know, with all the women doing this, there's going to be a lot more attention to the detail. There won't be the big ego. I don't think
Sure.
Unless my manager turns out to be a monster I don't know
Well,
about.
we're all looking forward to the movie and certainly the Broadway show as well. Hopefully that'll be coming right after the movie. And I just want to say, if you don't follow Tommy on social media, I think you have a Facebook, a Twitter, and an Instagram. So
We are all over the place.
So make sure you follow Tommy.
And a website.
And a website. And make sure that you check him out on tour as well. And also on SiriusXM on Sundays.
Absolutely.
And for our show, real quick, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at CurtinCole87. Appreciate your support. I just want to thank Tommy again.
That was great.
Tommy,
You asked all the right questions.
It's been a pleasure.
Let me ramble
Oh,
on.
hey, you're a great storyteller, and this was a real treat. So thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.
God bless. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Tommy.